Hello and welcome to the CBMM and Partners Mobility Leadership Debate. The mobility sector is undergoing radical change and transformation. Automotive product makers and mobility service providers are responding to heightened challenges, new demands, new technologies, and new players in the marketplace. Increasing electrification, the development and introduction of autonomous driving and AI, and a drive for sustainable technologies are all increasingly important drivers of change. Today I'm joined by a number of recognised leaders driving and responding to these changes to discuss mobility trends and challenges. So I think to start off with, we'll ask all of the panel, what's the single biggest challenge facing the mobility sector today? Pat, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, the company I work for, ABB, we provide charging infrastructure. So of course, as more electric vehicles are part of the infrastructure, we need more of this charging infrastructure in place, where in the large urban centers or depots or fleet operators, the space is already defined sometimes. It's tough to fit this equipment in there as we do that, both physically and electrically, making sure the grid can handle it. So that's probably our biggest area.
Rodrigo?
Yes, we've been working quite a lot in the changing, in the materials point of view, what is going to be the new trends of batteries and how the chemical composition and the oxides can help, and also maximize and improve the performance. So one thing that always we like to promote now, how we can develop Ulsan bolt battery that can charge really fast and also is a marathonist that can handle a very long cycling and many cycling. So this is the challenging. So we are finding quite hard to develop in this, how can material can help on this.
Alejandro?
I think for me, maybe looking a bit more from a distance, the key challenge of this huge disruption that is going to happen in mobility is the health of the industry. For me, the industry has a huge challenge, especially the car industry, because it's going to have to adapt, it's going to have to create a new business model. The margins on making electric cars at the moment are not the same as the margins at making internal combustion vehicles, but it's a very important industry. And I think we have to all be conscious of keeping a robust car industry is key for society, for our economies. So I think in this disruption there is the risk that the car industry may suffer a lot, and I think that's something that we have to keep in mind.
John?
I think that's very well put. I think that the real challenge is how to manage the change from old to new and to develop a new state which is economically viable. At the end of the day, the car industry has been around for over 100 years, very standard, stable, with lots of infrastructure that's been pretty much unchanged throughout the period. Now you have a situation where the combination of disruptive trends and disruptive tech has really turned it on its head, and trying to come through that, recognizing that much of the industry is very capital intensive with a lot of investment, a lot of lead time involved in product development, in development of new technology, and managing things like industrial infrastructure like car plants and so forth. Doing all of that at the same time, if developing the economic viability of the future state is a real challenge.
And Renata?
Well, I think one big challenge is for companies to stay ahead of competition and bring new mobility solutions and services to the market as quick as possible. And there are some elements that I think are very important to be solved in that matter, which is, first of all, what do customers want? So what is the real expectation? And then, is their technology available? Is the technology mature? And is the technology affordable? What type of infrastructure needs to be put in place for the solution to work? And last but not least, what about regulations and laws that need to be discussed?
Okay, all interesting stuff. We'll get into that in more detail in a few moments' time. Alejandro, we'll start with the idea of smart cities. What does that mean to you? And with your Formula E project, how readily are cities looking to change, do you think?
A smart city has become like a very used term that almost is applicable to many, many different things now. In Formula E, we made a decision since the beginning, which was to take the races to the cities, inside the city. And this has given us exposure to many, obviously different cities in many different parts of the world. But there is, and we have seen a common trend in every city. Every authority of every city is really trying to apply this smart city concept. They apply it on completely different ways. But at the end, it means with technology, make a city is a better place to live. Obviously, pollution is a key part of it. So to tackle the city pollution, which is the biggest problem cities have today, and it's going to only go bigger because I think now it's 50% of the population lives in cities, going up to 75% in a couple of decades. Cities is where the battle is going to be won or lost. And the use of technology will be key, first for this fight against city pollution, but then to make mobility solutions in the city also practical. And I think there, combining many different technologies is what's going to bring the key solutions. So I think combining driverless with electric, with connected, with 5G, with all these things at the same time together is what will deliver solutions.
And John, on that, could you outline how the world is moving from automotive products to mobility services and what that means?
Well, it's a very difficult transition, and it's personal for me, working at Ford for such a long time, where I was developing products, and then at the end of my career at Ford, developing mobility services. I could see that transition. Traditionally, car companies have made a little bit of money selling cars, a little bit of money financing cars, a little bit of money servicing cars. But with costs that were being built into cars increasingly for environmental reasons, safety reasons, et cetera, margins have been shrinking dramatically. Perhaps less so for premium manufacturers, but more so for volume manufacturers like Ford and GM. And so the manufacturers have been seeking ways of replenishing that revenue. How can they reach out from their existing business model and grow a relationship with customers to generate a stream of revenue over time? And that's been very difficult. I mean, many of these mobility services don't yet make money. It's a challenge to people like us to work with companies to actually find out what is a value equation that makes money for everybody. Because without that, it's going to be difficult to make it sustainable in the long term.
Renata, Porsche are almost 90 years old now, so how has the transition been there?
Well, I think the transformation needs to occur in two dimensions. One dimension is really the business model innovation, so being able to bring new mobility services, shared services, for example, and on the other hand, a product innovation. So bringing new vehicle concepts such as autonomous, electric, and connected. And of course, therefore, the company needs to get very customer-centric. It needs to build a solid strategy to develop an innovation-driven and agile organization, integrate the newest technologies, plus, of course, build very strong partnerships.
Okay. Pat, of course, battery charging is fundamental to the success of electric vehicles. What do you think needs to happen to make that easier and to remove range anxiety?
Yeah, well, we like to try to make it more range enablement than range anxiety, but we try to build a DC fast charging systems that help enable more use cases. As these batteries get bigger and bigger, the power density is changing, the energy density of batteries changing. You need to charge faster starts as a requirement. For instance, I was part of our energy storage group for a while. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago, all we could get was maybe a megawatt hour in a 20-foot footprint of batteries, safely and reliably,
Yeah.
where it was protected and had all the infrastructure in place to make sure it could go to the grid. Today, that same container might have 3.5 megawatt hours of batteries. So it's the same thing in the transportation segment as we're packaging batteries in these vehicles, make sure they're safe, but they get bigger and bigger. So. That's a big key.
Obviously, Formula E has had experience of the whole battery range anxiety thing, hasn't it? Going down to one car
Yeah.
for this year.
Yeah, I mean, in Formula E, when we started, we had to take a bit of a radical approach because the batteries for the race cars didn't last for the whole race. So we decided to give 2 cars to every driver. But of course, always since the beginning, we wanted to eliminate that change of car. And we thought that actually that was going to be an asset if we achieved it. And we did. McLaren has produced this battery that now can last the whole race. And I think that has been the major, probably visible technology achievement of Formula E.
And presumably for Porsche as well, the battery element is the key part of it.
Well, is one of the aspects that we're aiming bringing to the table. One very interesting example is the Porsche Taycan, which is our first fully electric car that's going to come out end of this year.
Indeed. Rodrigo, over 80 million cars sold globally in 2018. What are the technical challenges that need to be met in order to make them safer and more sustainable and greener?
Yeah, this is the challenge that we have been working around the globe. And the challenge is lightweighting is something very important. And it is one of the equations that niobium alloys can help. So improve the strengths and then reduce the weight of the performance. So it's one of the projects as well that we launched in Goodwood together with Extreme E and the body in white, showing the case that it was lighter and safer. And then improving the crash test performance, so it's very important as well, because we still have regions in the globe that we have a lot of people dying because of car crashing. So it's very important to improve the safety. So 80 million production yearly, we have a huge challenge to improve the sustainability, the emissions, and also to improve safety. That is all about niobium strategy is working in these terms to improve it.
Extreme E, tell us a little bit about that.
Extreme E is, I don't know how to call it, maybe like a sequel of Formula E. Extreme E is a completely radical new sport that is going to be the platform for SUVs, electric SUVs, to showcase the performance in any kind of environment. We're going to take these races to the most extreme and most damaged ecosystems that are under threat for different reasons linked to climate change, to ocean pollution, etc. For example, we're going to take it to the Arctic to showcase how the ice cap is receding. We're going to take them to the Amazon jungle to show some areas that are suffering for deforestation. We're going to take it to the Himalayas to show the retreat of the glaciers in the mountain ice, etc. So it's going to be a championship that's going to be very much linked to those problems, and it's going to showcase electric SUVs in any condition.
Yeah, so as with Formula E, it's a proving ground for electric vehicles and technology. What evidence are you seeing for accelerated tech transfer into mainstream vehicles?
I mean, the actors in Formula E are, or I should say the ABB Formula E Championship, are the teams, the manufacturers. And it's really them who make happen this transfer of technology from the racetrack to the road car. I only know what they tell me, but I speak a lot with many of them. A lot of the experience and the data they're collecting in the championship and the software development they're doing, it's immediately applicable to road cars. Some of the technology, like the powertrains, are being also used in some of the models that some of the brands are putting on the road, etc. It's basically very wide, the possibilities of transfer of technology from a championship, especially a championship using electric technology, because internal combustion, Formula One has been there for 70 years. Maybe there were more lessons in the beginning, but Formula One now it's really, really far down the line on the development curve. Formula E or electric powertrain technology is still in the learning curve, I would say.
And when you're in that learning curve, John, what kinds of collaboration are needed and partnerships? What partnerships are forming already?
Well, I think partnerships are critically important, both within the industry and without. Traditional companies like Ford and VW have to try and maintain economies of scale and try and develop hugely expensive technologies together in order to try and save costs and move towards viability. The role of the supply base is absolutely critical as well, and having good suppliers that bring forward technology is hugely important. But also, outside the industry, in the ecosystem, if I can use a rather overused expression, you're talking about the need to work cross-functionally, the need for car companies to work with telecoms companies, to work with energy companies. And this is something that hasn't happened in the past, where industries have operated very much in a silo. So being able to reach out across sector to manage cultural differences and things is hugely important. And it's not just the large companies as well. There is a huge challenge with trying to work between large corporate companies and very small entrepreneurs, bleeding edge startups and so forth. Often companies that don't really fit well with large corporate companies like Ford and GM. So working on that cultural change, working on how that is productive for all parties and what the value proposition is the challenge.
Rodrigo, how have you found the partnerships element of?
It's fantastic. When we joined Formula E, we find out the first time I was in Berlin about 3 years ago, and then I could see OEMs there and the openness to discuss about technology and partnership. And then we joined Formula E, and together with the Formula E event, we do our Tech Day. That is all about joining, as John mentioned, bringing the OEMs, bringing the auto parts, the energy company, also the startups, also new cases, and interact and talk about technology and business and how we're going to solve this problem. And since the beginning, a new business is born from this Tech Day. So the discussions keep doing, and it's very good for Niobium, it's very good for our partners, and it's very good for the development of new technology and implement it to the street. So we really discuss real case and implement it to solve a real problem. So this is fantastic, and we are very glad to have this kind of discussion as we have been doing for 3 years this.
Pat, are you involved in a lot of cross-pollination of technologies?
Yeah, well, that's part of it, is always trying to enable technologies and validate the solutions. That helps create new use cases and business models as well. So that's ABB's strategy, is helping to have successful projects and enable.
Renata, let's move it on a little bit to what is the Porsche and, for that matter, the VAG group on electrification, but also on AI and autonomous. What are the plans there?
Well, the Volkswagen Group will invest by 2023 around $50 billion just in electric vehicles, autonomous driving, digitization, and mobility services. In terms of electrification, the offensive is aggressive and is set for the next 10 years. And for autonomous driving and AI, I think there are two important elements. One is really building partnerships with tech companies, but on the other hand, also developing these capabilities inside of the company.
Interesting. And Pat, when we speak about smart cities, we think of how we're going to charge our, little car that we're driving to and from. But how does that differ? Supplying electrification for commercial vehicles?
Yeah, that's really been a challenge, because the fleet operators have, the depot is already built a lot of times. It's there. The infrastructure is there. Now you have to fit this charging infrastructure on the premise. And also, does it have enough capacity from the grid to support this? So then the fleet operator has to figure out, well, can we overnight charge? Can we charge at night at a slower rate? Can we put chargers out in the routes to do some opportunity charging? And that's what we've been doing, is creating the tools. We have up to 600 kilowatt chargers, so you can actually charge these out in the routes. Or have a hybrid solution of that, maybe a little bit of both types of charging. So, but it definitely is causing challenges.
Interesting. Rodrigo, how would you sum up the challenge and opportunity to combine new and existing technologies to deliver a vision for the future?
Yeah, one of the cases that we are using quite a lot is our operation as well. So we are discussing with partners how we can improve the transportation inside our production line as well. Maybe autonomous, electrifying our fleet, and also how we can use more and more renewable energy. So we want to have this showcase as well. That is something that we can solve the problem of the street that is already, for example, taking a country like Brazil, the electrification is, let's say, very early stage, but we can create showcase, and for transportation like commercial vehicles can be a good case, and electrification, autonomous, clean energy, this kind of thing, we are bringing this case and promoting this all over the globe. So the only way that we can do this is through partnership. That's always we take our own problems as well, how we can solve it and promote it all over the globe.
So I want to ask you all, what is your dream of mobility in the next 10 years, in 20 years' time? What do you see as the future?
My dream, if I can ask whatever I want,
Yeah.
would be that someone does what Moore did with the silicon for the microchips
Yeah.
with batteries. It's a chemical problem. So someone will discover, the use of niobium for batteries, something doing, and you will probably Roddy Basso from McLaren will do that with their batteries. Someone has to do it, and you have a battery that lasts, you charge your phone once a year, or you charge your car after 5,000 miles. That's my dream. Of course, I said I'm thinking big,
Yeah.
but that would be, if someone cracks the battery problem, that will change the world.
John?
Well, I think from a customer perspective, having a mobility system that is seamless, that works for everybody, not just people in cities, that allows people to have common payment systems, common ticketing systems, that has last mile coverage, all of these things in an integrated way. At the moment, things are still in parcels, and I'd like to see it much more integrated.
Well, on that point, just briefly, is there a bit of a contradiction in terms of the cities are the place that we think of having all these electric vehicles, but the cities are the places where it's most difficult to have the infrastructure to charge those electric vehicles? If people are living in blocks of flats, they don't have a garage to park in and to charge it.
Yeah, I think the rural environment has its own challenges, but I think I think we talk a lot about smart cities, but in reality, in many communities there are a lot of people who are travelling into cities on a daily basis, people who are living in the countryside and don't want to be abandoned by this tech sort of renaissance, if you like, and I think it's charging is a very good point, because as you say, you can't have a lead hanging out of a window in a block of flats. But what is the role? What is the role of home charging? What is the role of fast charging and home charging? How can you integrate charging at home using things like microgrid applications? How can you use batteries in the home so that as part of the transportation infrastructure, but also to provide electrical power for the home, for smart systems and so forth, and how do those things become more integrated, the home and the car and so forth, for not just people in cities but also people in rural environments.
Renata, your vision of the future?
Well, since I travel a lot, my dream is that I can wake up in the morning and tell my mobility integrated system that I need to be in Berlin by 4:00 p.m. and it will give me right away my complete itinerary based on my preferences, and who knows, my journey may be in a passenger drone.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Rodrigo, what's your dream of the future?
Yes, one point is the integration would be very important, and also one thing that if we travel to regions that, like, I'll bring Brazil to our case, for sometimes even the consumer does not know how to use these new technologies and this integration. So they are stuck in the old times technology and cannot change their life for having a more integrated and more easy life. So consumer will be a change as well in the mindset. This integration would be fantastic and important. And then in our point of view, the materials will probably facilitate it, but they have also a challenge in how you produce more using less material as well in more sustainable way. So that is the challenge. The dream is how integrate all these concepts together.
Okay. And Pat?
Well, I'll take it a step further. Listening to the responses here, it's actually, integration is key, but it's getting the information back and then having the automation to make it all a smart system working, optimizing it. Whether it's on the grid, knowing that yes, we can charge this infrastructure right now, or maybe it's better to have a slower rate at this time of day versus this time of day, and to do it all by just someone plugging in and it's all done for you and no one has to think about it or do anything, but to optimize the use and make it all work together. That would be a very nice thing to have, I think.
And another really, really interesting discussion.